When the fearful avoidant faces rejection, it's often not just a breakup, but instead has a massive ripple effect on how the fearful avoidant views trust and sees intimacy. In today's video, we are going to do a deep dive into the emotional turmoil that a fearful avoidant experiences after a breakup and that paradox of yearning for somebody, but also fearing engulfment. In fact, we will cover the major stages that a fearful avoidant experiences, specifically if they are the ones broken up with. And you'll see some of the different processing at different times and for different reasons. If you are the fearful avoidant listening to this, my hope for you is that you can better see these stages that you may experience post-breakup, in particular if somebody ever breaks up with you, and go through some of the tools and ideas we'll talk about so that you can make sure that you feel prepared, because sometimes breakups are going to happen. Sometimes relationships don't work out, especially in the process of dating and looking for what it is that we're truly seeking or what might be a really good fit for us. And if you're the loved one of a fearful avoidant, my hope for you is that you have some understanding and empathy, but also awareness in terms of how this may affect you if you were broken up or if you had broken up with a fearful avoidant, and how to really develop the healthiest next steps to proceed forward. So when the fearful avoidant is broken up with, they tend to experience a few crucial stages, basically 6 major things in this post-breakup period that can be really useful to understand that you may go through an experience, because it will give you more context for this and for what to expect. And it's so funny, but when I was running my practice back in the day with clients, I would see all the time, this is an analogy, but I would see all the time how people would have anxiety, and then they would be anxious about having anxiety. And it's like they fear the anxiety itself, and the whole thing just becomes added stress. It's like another layer to the distress. And I think that basically has relevance for this concept as well of a breakup, or even of the stages of a relationship. Like, if we don't have context that, hey, guess what? There's 6 stages of a relationship. You go dating, honeymoon, and then everybody goes through the power struggle. And then if you make it out of that, you go stability, commitment, bliss stages. That's so useful for people to be like, oh, we're fighting more, but I get it. We're a year and a half in, we're kind of in the power struggle. We have these kinks to work out in our communication right now. But same thing, like if you are somebody who's a fearful avoidant and you realize, oh, if I'm going through a breakup, there's these stages to things, that can feel like such a relief to have that understanding. And the anxiety example was going to be that if you have anxiety and then you have context for why you're anxious, you realize, oh, this specific trigger makes me feel anxious. You don't feel anxious about the randomness of anxiety because you realize it's not random, and context for things can bring us a lot of certainty and relief. So the first stage that fearful avoidants will go through is generally hurt and anger. And they will very quickly slide into the next stage, which is this numbness. Okay. So these are our first 2 stages. Generally, if a fearful avoidant is dumped in a relationship or broken up with, they'll feel a lot of hurt. But fearful avoidance, it wasn't conducive for a lot of fearful avoidance in their childhood to stay in the hurt. Usually fearful avoidants were exposed to circumstances in childhood that were beyond their age. Essentially, they had to grow up very fast. And when you are somebody who has to grow up very fast in a confusing and chaotic environment, there's not a lot of room a lot of the time to just stay in your hurt and to be vulnerable. So oftentimes, anger for a fearful avoidant attachment style is a big coping mechanism. It's a way of trying to navigate the world. And, beneath anger is almost always hurt or fear or some kind of combination of the two. And so there often is this hurt from being rejected, maybe from feeling abandoned, even betrayed. And that may manifest as anger because that's the most protective way that fearful avoidants often will feel their feelings. And then that will move into numbness. Fearful avoidants will then go into stage 2, and they will try to numb themselves out with distractions, with excessive exercising, with binge eating food, perhaps, or drinking, or going out all the time, or trying to get back on dating apps immediately and just distract yourself nonstop. I mean, there can be very many manifestations of how a fearful avoidant will then try to process a breakup, but they will often numb things out. Then they go into stage number 3 a lot. And the stage number 3 is that they will sometimes even become a little bit spiteful to their ex. Now, this comes from actually a shared coping mechanism that fearful avoidants have with dismissive avoidance, which is to really try to flaw find somebody. Usually, the more we can project flaws onto somebody instead of have them on a pedestal and project all these good features onto them, the more we feel like, okay, well, I didn't need them so much anyways. And this is a way to kind of stay safe and manage your own emotions. Again, this is maladaptive. This isn't like the best case would be that instead we regulate through meeting our unmet needs, through working through these painful stories we may have about ourselves after a breakup. But when we didn't get access to learning those things in childhood, and we were always sort of throughout our early adult lives doing the best we could with what resources and understanding we did have, that becomes a very common coping mechanism. And that can even lead to a little bit of spitefulness. That can lead to maybe, saying negative things about your ex to other people. Maybe even sending spiteful text messages to your ex at different times. That could be, doing something spiteful on social media, like blocking and deleting them. Again, I'm not saying blocking and deleting is spiteful. Sometimes that's a healthy strategy if we need to do that to move on. But there may be this stage where there can be a little bit of spitefulness that takes place. And then after we go through the stage of hurt and anger, and then the numbness, and then the spitefulness, we will sometimes see the fearful avoidant move into the stage of actually being a little bit self-sabotaging of themselves. And this is where fearful avoidant may make a previous breakup mean that they weren't worthy enough, or they weren't lovable enough, or they weren't good enough. And in fact, that must mean that you're not going to be worthy or good enough for anybody else. And so that must mean that you have to keep everybody at arm's length and never let anybody in or never trust somebody again, because you will always be betrayed. And these are old stories that come from imprinted feelings that usually are way before you ever even dated somebody. A lot of these experiences for fearful avoidance, assuming that fearful avoidant attachment style was something you developed in your childhood, are actually feelings and imprints that you had all the way back when you were really young. So maybe you were in a really chaotic environment growing up. Maybe there was a lot of confusing behavior. Maybe you didn't get your needs met in the way that you wanted to, and maybe you couldn't really trust your environment. And so these are things that you stored and held on to as a means of self-protecting in case they should ever happen again. You could be more prepared. But you may see that these are all the very things that get activated if you are broken up with. And these old stories, sort of like broken records, come back up. And the reason these are like broken records is because your subconscious mind is like software that takes in programs. And then when something reminds you of a program, hits the play button, and that old recorder or tape recorder replays those old tapes. And so a lot of times these things come up in that particular manner, and we may think that they're so real about right now. We're so sure if this is about reality right now because this person broke up with us. But a lot of times it's actually that we've been carrying these ideas and concepts and programs for a very, very long time. And so it's important to be able to unpack them and to move into a space where we can question these things, because it is an injustice that you were imprinted with these things to begin with. And I'm not sitting here blaming anybody's parents or things like that. Like, everybody's literally doing the best they can at the time. But, in a perfect world, those things wouldn't have happened. But it's an even greater injustice when, because of difficult things in the past, we tell ourselves that these things will happen over and over again, and we prevent ourselves from actually living with a full heart in the present, and prevent ourselves from having a life free from the past. We carry it with us and repeat it over and over again. We take it everywhere we go. And it's like, well, that happened so long ago. That was in the past. Like, the fact that you replay that in your mind on a daily basis, you're reliving those wounds over and over again. And there's a course, I'm not going to go into it too much right now, but we talk a lot about this. If you want to let go of those past pieces of baggage, we have a course you can check out fully for free called the Emotional Mastery and Belief Reprogramming course. And it's about how to reprogram those old concepts and ideas while still having the ability to be cautious and healthy and vet for things to make sure that you can shed these ideas that you will always be abandoned or always be betrayed, but still also know how to vet for people properly in dating, so that you go in with caution, but a sense of peace and openness. And that healthy balance is what we're looking for in secure attachments. We're actually also running a lifetime promotion right now at the Personal Development School. So if you want to actually come in, gain access to all of our courses, we have 60 courses that range from attachment healing bootcamp style courses to career courses to subconscious reprogramming courses. If you want access to all of this for life, as well as we have daily events, peer support groups every day and webinars every day, Monday through Saturday, with myself, where you get one-on-one questions asked and answered, and with other trained coaches and counselors who will also support that one-to-one time on literally a daily basis. You will gain access to all of that for life, for a limited time at a huge discount. So I'll put the link to that as well down below too. So after we see these stories go on for a long time, we may eventually find that the fearful avoidant either rebounds or, moves into a stage of acceptance eventually and sort of goes, okay, that is the past of the breakup. And it is what it is, and it's time for me to move on. And it's through that stage of acceptance that tends to indicate that we're moving into a space of healing. Now, sometimes if there's a rebound, we may see that the fearful one almost delays their healing because they don't get to move into the stage of acceptance. And that can actually be something that when there's delayed healing, you may find yourself processing. If the rebound relationship doesn't work out, you almost get hit by this double feeling of a breakup, of it not working out with the rebound person, but also of it not working out with the past ex. And now you're kind of processing both experiences at the same time. And that's fairly common for fearful avoidants if they do rebound very quickly. But then the last major part here is that we will often see, which is very unique to fearful avoidance, that fearful avoidants may yearn for some form of connection to an ex in a friendly way, if they actually let that ex in originally. So if it wasn't like a 2-month relationship, but if they truly let somebody in, because it's so rare that they do that, they may have this feeling of like, okay, it's fine. I won't be romantically interested in this person, but let's have some sort of friendship. And oftentimes, a fearful avoidant does that because it's their way of trying to maintain a connection that's rare for them because it's so unlikely and difficult for them to originally be vulnerable to people. And I say this all the time on this channel, but fearful avoidants often seem vulnerable and, in a sense, have a degree of vulnerability, but they are often vulnerable about things they don't actually feel vulnerable about. So they may share like past experiences or something about childhood, but those things that they're really feeling vulnerable about, those deep, dark inner things, they can take to the grave, like really lock down like a vault. And so when somebody does cross that threshold or that barrier, they often feel this kind of sacred bond to that person. And they tend to be willing and quite able to shut down their feelings with somebody in a romantic way to try to pursue a friendship. But that's something that has to be assessed as either healthy or unhealthy. And that's a really important thing to dig into. So again, if you want to do a deeper dive into the belief reprogramming course fully for free, just for a limited time, I will put that link down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for being here and for watching. If you're enjoying this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And I can't wait to see you in future videos.